Hello once again, guys. Again, this is Professor Bryan Yves Araneta, and this time I'll be educating you about HACCP or HACCP. Now, this is a major topic in our fish processing subject on processed food inspection and the safety under Dr. Rosita Braganza. This is probably the most difficult subject I have, but again, it's still worth studying, especially if you are into food science or if you are a fish processing major. But in this presentation, I want to be less technical, and I'll try if I can discuss this in the layman's perspective. And again, I'm not an expert, so please feel free to correct me in the comment sections below. Now, HACCP stands for Hazard Analysis and Critical Control Point System. So it's actually well known among food companies, and there are plenty of textbooks and journal articles about it. Yet, for most people in the fisheries industry, I think maybe it's still a gray area, especially for the non-technical people. Of course, everyone knows it's to ensure food safety. But I believe in most businesses here, or food businesses here in the Philippines, it's not well observed, or maybe if implemented, it's not really optimized, or shall we say applied properly to a specific product or commodity. Now, HACCP was actually developed as a standard protocol to ensure food safety in space. So it's actually for the US astronauts. And long ago, even until now, food safety is only evaluated after looking at the final product. Now, what's the problem with this? Of course, you will only fully test the safety after you have consumed the product, which is of course very risky. So scientists were able to devise this system as a sort of a preventive measure by itself in the quality control process. But take note that HACCP alone is not enough to ensure safety. So we need to rely on the expertise of people who are implementing it. So that's the reason why there are still plenty of news here and there about food contamination and many other consumer complaints, because again, despite the robustness of the system, human error is still a major flaw. Now, this is what I want to emphasize here. People in the food industry must or have to always bear in mind the consumer's right on safe consumption of their products. So think of HACCP as an instrument to reduce the risks. And it's not just mere paperwork or some kind of a vanity plan for marketing purposes. Now, these are the 7 direct steps when applying HACCP. Okay. First, you need to understand your product. So how can you make it safe for consumption? What potential harm can it bring to your consumers? Then you should review your production process from start to finish. This means you need to have a clear understanding of the working environment and the step-by-step processing of your product. So there should be no shortcuts here, and the process must be standard and fixed. Okay, only then can you identify potential hazards that can happen along the way. So hazards can be biological, chemical, or physical, and only trained personnel can do this. So lack of theory and awareness can lead to, let's say, underestimation of these hazards, or some of these hazards can remain undetected. Okay? Now, the hazards must be controllable, or else there is no other way to continue. So think of these control measures that will sort of prevent the potential hazards. So you can grade the controls. You can identify the maximum and the minimum safety levels or points. Maybe we can only focus on the minimum levels or minimum safety levels. Okay, 5, you monitor the controls. So there can be fluctuations or other factors that can affect how the controls work. I think this requires several runs and several runs of your process and a lot of data analysis or strict data collection to ensure that your controls are working at the expected ranges. And 6, don't forget to write down the results of your trials. Okay, you should show the evidence. Only unscrupulous individuals hide the evidence. This can actually be a moral dilemma for some of us, okay, or to some, as data can be manipulated to show a more acceptable picture. But let's leave the benefit of the doubt to the consumers. Anyway, they are free to choose what they want to buy, and we also know that product reputation is also established by trustworthy companies. In 7, you have to ensure that everything above, okay, all of this must continue to work well. This means you cannot just relax and become lenient after 2 or 3 production batches. Okay. Now, for every production operation, there are also 7 principles in the HACCP system. And this has been published several times by the Codex Alimentarius Commission. Here in my text from 1993 to 2009. And but in my future lectures, I will also try to use these principles to a specific commodity like maybe shrimps or tuna. But for now, I will just give you a bird's eye view of these principles. Okay, first, you have to conduct a hazard analysis. So, okay, this is where you need every step of the process and you identify where potential hazards can occur. So, you always start with the initial entry of your raw material, and of course that will end up to the finished product. So there must be this process flow diagram. Okay, a process flow diagram must be constructed, and a team of experts should or will identify the biological, chemical, and physical hazards that could occur in each step. And these experts will also sort of estimate the probability of the hazard occurring and the extent of harm that it can bring to the consumer. At this point, knowing the hazards can make you devise preventive measures. Okay, and but of course there are also standard protocols, or there are also standard control measures to follow. But depending on the nature of the hazards, you can actually devise new strategies and techniques that can be employed, and maybe you can patent this processes or techniques if geared towards the processing of a specific product. Okay, number 2, determine the critical control points. Now you can call this your CCPs. Now when you say critical, it means we are in the boundary of harm and safety. So we need to establish where that boundary is. Because again, it could mean life and death in some situations. Okay? Then you establish the critical limits. Again, there should be a measurable value. So, a measurable value. Something that you can measure, that you can put in numbers as to what safe or unsafe is. Okay? Now, for every CCPs you identified in Principle 2, you need to establish those critical limits. Now, these are sometimes referred to as your safety limit or tolerance limit. And of course, beyond this value means that safety can no longer be ensured. Okay, 4, establish a CCP monitoring system. Monitoring is always part of every planning process. Now, how are you going to monitor the reliability of the controls? Okay, so are you sure that the safety controls established by Principle 2 maintains the safety limit value or established by Principle 3? Okay, so the monitoring system makes sure that the controls are working properly to maintain the step or process within the safe range. Okay. Now, 5, you establish the corrective actions to be taken when monitoring indicates that a particular CCP is not under control. we know that the process cannot go on if we cannot control the level of safety that is set for every CCP. So there must be a way to correct the controls, or we can even change the entire control with another strategy. So the point here is that we should be consistent in ensuring that we meet the required value for safety. So controls that seem to be unreliable must be improved or replaced when necessary. And 6, you have to establish procedures for verification to confirm that the HACCP system is working correctly. So verify, keep on verifying. That's why this is a rigorous system. And then you establish documentation concerning all the procedures and records appropriate to these principles and their application. So just like we have discussed a while ago, you keep records because you need all the data you have gathered to further enhance your quality control measures, perhaps in the future. And of course, to make your paperwork more credible, especially again if you have put all the details in place. Now, the benefits of implementing HACCP in the fisheries food industry cannot be overemphasized. So instead of looking at it as an additional cost or burden to the industry, business people should invest on it. Because again, it plays an important role in, shall we say, keeping the ethics in the food business practice. Okay, safety, of course. It actually adds value to the products. And it builds confidence when you want to venture in the international market. And actually, our neglect of the HACCP, I believe, also prevents the marketability of Philippine products in international trade. Actually, most of our products are good only for local consumption. Okay, good for local consumption. Yeah, even the term good there is even questionable. Because, again, foodborne diseases still continue to plague us in a variety of factors, even worsen the situation. So good quality food is now scarce relative to the number of people that we need to feed globally. So humans also become even more vulnerable to foodborne illnesses. Maybe compared to decades ago, okay, when there were still real and processed foods out there, that's enough for everyone. Right now, there are a lot of unprocessed food, and we become vulnerable to, let's say, unhealthy eating habits and lifestyles. So just imagine if a global pandemic can be spread via food products. The tourism sector also demand more food for the tourists from various places. This can also mean increased risk, especially when we have differences in immune tolerance and responses. But good thing is, with the current information and communication technology, consumers start to become self-conscious and aware of their rights on buying safe food. A lot of contaminants are already known to consumers, okay? From your heavy metals to pathogens to microplastics. A lot are actually actually particular even with the country of origin of the food products. Because again, the social media has also become an informative platform and also full of propaganda and misconceptions. Okay, if I need to mention that about food and health. Now, with this in mind, expect more people to demand for transparent inspection and testing of processed food products. Just like, but as to your non-food products, okay, there is this usual mode in the inspection process or testing where they sample. Okay, you take samples from a production line. Now, it's easy to spot the limitations of this method. Okay, aside from, of course, wasting the samples after testing and hazard detection, there is still a need for unique analysis procedures, of course, for every product. And you need to establish the reliability of all these testing protocols. This can be very challenging if you do only the post-production testing. Again, we are only relying on the end product and we are sampling only. So what if the product with the hazard was not sampled? Okay, this will make us again reconsider the distribution and frequency of hazards in your production. Okay, in the end, we cannot really get away with the error. So it's always there if we cannot test every product, and for sure, we cannot submit all the products for an inspection. Okay, testing can be reliable if the hazards are homogeneously distributed. The probability of picking up those samples with hazards is equal for all samples. But if the hazards are random, the chance that you can capture and detect them is also very low. For example, what if a pathogen only thrived in a small cluster of the product that is out of reach of the inspector? Again, these things can occur in real life. And some sampling is usually done conveniently with a few exemptions, but most probably in our country, I bet sampling is not always random. It's usually systematic or convenient sampling. And of course, with the results of this inspection and tests, to an ordinary consumer, this might be enough. Okay, but this creates a false sense of security about the product, the safety of the product, and companies want it this way, perhaps to clear the complications, and so they can focus more on selling. So why would you dig your dirty linens if you are inclined only to getting more profit from your business? Okay, so this culture we need to let's say control or stop if we can. Okay, so let's now look at the real benefits that we can get from the HACCP system. HACCP prioritizes food safety without bias. As long as you commission an expert personnel or team to make informed judgments, you can never really go wrong with the decisions that you need to take in every step of your production process. HACCP always emphasize the need for documented evidence of every step in the manufacturing process. So this can really save the company from unwanted lawsuits. Food safety is ensured both in the actual process and in paper. 3, this may be debatable to some, but HACCP can make the company save money in the long run. Okay, that can save a lot of, let's say, customer dissatisfaction, litigations, losses from post-production testing and analysis, and even marketing expenses. So this is because failure is prevented at an earlier stage of your production. And once you have established the critical points, you can just hire or train a few personnel to manage this for maintenance purposes only. Okay? 4, if you are to sell your products in the international markets, you are following what is standard, legal, and acceptable. So no HACCP means you have almost zero high-level business opportunities. And since HACCP is based on multidisciplinary inputs and assessment, again, you have a team, it will lead to improved production enhancement and development in the long run. Okay, we know that business opportunities changes every year, and you would not want others to outcompete your product or your place in the market. The participation of various experts ensure that you are still in the zone when it comes to competition and market reputation. Now, some may say HACCP is not for everyone. So they say we are only a small-scale business. I only sell fish balls and shrimp crackers. We cannot afford expert services. This may have some bite of reality in it, but actually HACCP principles can still be applied to whatever food business whether it's small scale or it's a multinational corporation. If you look back into what we have discussed, you will the 7 steps and the principles that we have a while ago. You will realize that you can also apply this in your small enterprise, even up to the individual level. You can also be a self-proclaimed expert if you know your business and the processes involved in your level. So you're also aware of the potential hazards, right? Like in fish balls, like a fish spine can hurt your customers, or maybe spoiled seafood can cause diarrhea. Again, if we only follow the principles diligently within our level of expertise and influence, we are already starting to observe food safety. And when good things start to come, okay, you are already there. You are already right in track. And what seems so complicated about the system will actually turn out to be an easy, regular thing to do when you have the resources ready. Sometimes we can get as close to common sense if we apply the principles in your small businesses. Now, from the gate to the plate, that's the usual line there. We are all aware of all the hands that touch the food, including the environment where this stopped over. The hazards are not hard to pinpoint. There are plenty of supply chain models to illustrate this. Maybe I can get one in the post-editing of this lecture. Now, for fish, you can start maybe after harvesting them from the sea or aquaculture ponds. Okay, what practices can inject hazards into the raw materials there? Then during the transportation to your kitchen, what are the things to consider then? On the actual processing of your product, and then to the distribution. So try to imagine it. In every step along the way, you can really determine potential hazards, and right there you can create preventive measures to minimize, for example, contamination. But in the strictest sense, of course, HACCP has been a regulatory requirement in international markets. So the International Organization for Standardization developed and published a certification standard for HACCP. Okay, it's an ISO thing here. The standard is based on Codex 2009, and this enables companies to have their system certified by independent assessors. And this include the following: food safety management system. So everything must be well documented. There should be a food safety management system. Number 2, we have management responsibility. There must be commitment to food safety. So you sort of commit to improve your food processing system for life, including your preparations in case something goes wrong, emergency plans. So it's all about preparedness, even in the face of uncertainty. 3, we have resource management. So the goal here is efficiency. Limited resource loss, and of course food safety programs must be environment friendly. And of course, planning and realization of safe products. So this is where HACCP will fall in including other food safety programs. So the principles must be in place with proper documentation. And finally, validation, verification, and improvement of the food safety management system. Now, because HACCP is a recognized effective method, it will give you your regulatory partners and your customers confidence in the safety of your operation, and it will indicate that you are a professional company that takes its responsibility seriously. So before I end this introduction to HACCP, let's look at some common misconceptions about HACCP. Now, number 1, HACCP can disrupt the manufacturing process, which is not good for any company. Now, the reason why we need to incorporate HACCP in every step of the production process, because again, it should be part of the process. so it cannot disrupt the process because it is part of it. Okay. 2, HACCP eliminates all the risk associated with food consumption. I have mentioned this already. Of course, this is not true, but we can get as close to 99% risk-free outcomes. And HACCP is not suitable for small companies, as discussed. Now, I ask you, will you buy from a vendor who has this idea in mind that HACCP is not suitable for small companies? Okay. 4, you only need to implement HACCP once. So this is not true because again, there must be constant monitoring and improvement of the system, especially if added steps are included in the manufacturing process. And 5, HACCP is not cost effective. So it's like the usual meme that we have: if education is expensive, try stupidity. Okay, sometimes people think that getting a HACCP plan in paper is already enough, the plan itself. So it's also like getting a diploma without learning at all. Okay, a HACCP requires active engagement and participation, not just a plan of action in paper. All right, so that's enough for now, guys. I'm actually planning to create 5 videos for this series, so please subscribe and get notified. Thank you very much for watching. Again, this is Professor Bryan Yves Araneta.